So I am a new Gen Z. I don't have a past reference point. I'm excited. I'm coming to this large organization. I've done the homework, and it seems like on my wish list I had 10 things, and that company seems to be checking off 7 or 8 of those. If I do get a bad boss, right? How do I identify one? Obviously, you've shared that in the beginning, but from the Gen Z's perspective, what can they be kind of looking for? And then second is, more importantly, how do they go about, kind of combating or the way to address that, right? They're new. Do they look for peer group help? Do they go to HR? So just some ideas there as well. So 2 questions.
Sure. So to start with the first one, in terms of what signs should you be looking for, and again, the caution here to the Gen Zs is there needs to be multiple of these signs repetitive. Then the
Good point.
one,
Yeah.
then the one incident that you and obviously if the one incident is large enough, then sure, please report it. But we've got to give the benefit sometimes to things that are happening in environment. I think the first, like we spoke about, is the lack of respect and civility. If you're finding foul language being used, if you're finding the shouting, and yes, managers can be upset but there is a way to express yourself, which is professional. You're not in an professional environment where shouting, aggressive behaviors can be used vocally, right? We're talking about the use of voice in that sense. So first look at that perspective. The second would be micromanagement. Are you being empowered today? Are they kind of breathing down your neck? Are they looking after the small little thing that's happening? Initially, as you enter the workforce, we have to train you as a manager. I would want to see, but once the trust is built, right? Macromanagement if is also after the trust is built. So give some learning rope to yourself, and know that you have to build the trust when you come into the organization, and then kind of look at some of these signs that would be there. I think the other is unrealistic expectations and demands. And this can be a little bit more maybe in the South Asian or Indian context. I just want to sort of highlight this, considering we have a global audience, is where people tend to just dump or expect the 70-hour week we're talking about, which was an Indian thing, or, expect long hours of work. If a manager is dumping their own work on you, and expecting you to be done, and then also maybe taking credit in a larger forum for the work that you have done. That is again something. And if you feel sometimes there are targets or things like, hey, the sales, we need to grow this, and you just started a career and you're expecting a 10x growth, it's unrealistic. It's just not possible. So be mindful. A stretch target is good, but there's a difference between a stretch target and having unrealistic targets. So that's the other thing. We spoke about a little bit of the unfair treatment when it could come to favoritism, etc. We're human. It's bound to happen. But if you're seeing outright when it comes to performance ratings, questions, I think it's also important to ask for data and not just go while you may feel in a certain way. So, but if data shows that there is unfair treatment happening to you and there are certain biases that are creeping in, that's another sign of a toxic boss. I think the last is the manipulative behavior that may take place again. So again, an example of this could be uh, they they treating you in a certain way in a closed room meeting, or in a one-on-one, but then going to their upper management and talking shiningly about you, or they being emotionally unavailable to you. I remember an example of somebody sharing with me about a boss that in a one-on-one meeting, the person wouldn't even ask how you are, or a simple good morning when you walk around and passing by, right? It's just basic signs of this. But but when it came to the leadership team, the same person, the manager, was all very jovial, would display the best behavior out there, right? So it was a complete mask. And so the perception, if you went the skip level, was always like, oh, this is a person who's really nice. What are you saying? And we'd all be like, you know, not happening here. So they tend to manipulate things and behaviors. So those are some of the signs that I would ask you to kind of look at for when you're working. What can you do? I think in today's day and age, it's important to record everything. And be it emails, if you feel a certain way, and I have found it very difficult myself because recording doesn't come to, at least I think, the Indians very easily. We tend to have more conversations and feel uncomfortable putting things down on an email, or capturing them in a certain way. But I think it's important today to capture these incidents that are happening, so that tomorrow, if you have to report a concern to the HR, you have the data available, because data is going to be very important. Perceptions do not go a very long way, and that's fair as well, right? Because how do you kind of clarify those? Second, if you're feeling a certain way, report the behavior. If you feel safe in doing that as well, so you have to understand. I think the Gen Z, you need to understand what are the guidelines that are available, people who are available to support you when it comes to lack of ethical behavior, non-compliant behavior. So read the rules and policies about it, even when you join an organization, so you don't. And we're having a lot of startup culture today, where some of these uh, policies may not be in place today, and then you're kind of stuck into what do you do in that sense. So I think you should be mindful and be aware of these policies that protect you from both emotional, physical, and sort of manipulative harm that may happen. uh, Seek support, like you said, Nikhil. It's very, very important. We spoke about this a little earlier as well. Talk to people, think about what actions can you do. um, Having good colleagues by your side. Again, EQ being contagious, you tend to maybe even find colleagues or people who think the same way about your manager. Try to get a variety of perspective, so that you are more informed, right? It could be an isolated incident, which is fine. It could be happening only towards you. It may not be happening around you, but I think it's best that you find people. Also, now organizations, if you're feeling emotionally down, mentally feeling stressed, anxious, there are enough hotlines and free counselors available that organizations provide. I think the Gen Z is more aware of their mental health, but these resources should be leveraged. There's nothing wrong in saying, hey, I'm having a bad time. I personally remember, to share a story, where I've had a phase where I was just feeling so disconnected because an incident that had happened. And I took help. I took professional help to understand what's going on here, and how do I kind of practice it both from my peers to deal with it, right? Because I may not be able to change the manager, but how do I want to still stay in the organization? So how do I change my ways of doing it, which does not lose me as a person, doesn't make me less authentic or reduces my self-confidence, but it's about drawing boundaries, which is another great way. You've got to draw boundaries, which means having those tough conversations. Don't let uh, you know, do this quitting thing or be a submissive employee that, okay, I'm just going to take it. It's okay to say no. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to say, I did not like the way I was spoken to. I don't, and in a way that is understanding and empathetic. I don't think, again, we need to be very loud and aggressive, because there is a feeling that may come into you about taking revenge, being upset and angry, right? So you've got to manage your own emotion as a Gen Z, and take some time to reflect and say, how am I going to approach this? Which is then being able to draw boundaries, say no, and clarify expectations, right? I think if your manager doesn't, and one of the things I do a lot of with my team members that I work with typically is saying, this is how I like to work. How would you like to work with me? And this conversation, I think, should happen within the first month or the first 3, 4 meetings you're having to share, hey, I have this style, right? I'm somebody who wants to build the trust, who likes to delegate and empower. If you have a question, you come to me and clarify it. But don't do the work if you're unclear and get me to repeat that work for you. Every manager will have their own style of working, and they have to be authentic to their style, right? It's been 15, 20 years that you've been growing to a certain style. So they need to understand your style, and you should understand their style as well. So that I think those mutual expectations really, really help in setting some base fundamental ways of working with each other.